For the latest news and updates on Tibet, subscribe to Yarloong YouTube channel. And don't forget to click the notification bell icon.
Thank you very much, Minister Dolma, and good morning to you all. I'm delighted to learn that the conference has been going as well as it seems to have, and that starting off with Speaker Pelosi's call for a plan of action here, and Richard Gere in his usual charismatic way putting across the message that many of us would have liked to hear. I feel that this is the right kind of occasion to touch base on perhaps a couple of less glamorous issues that are relevant to all of you. I understand that the idea is to have a discussion with the parliamentarians on the floor, so I don't want to make a long speech. I'll touch on 2 or 3 ideas, and then perhaps after the other panelists have spoken, we could have an exchange amongst ourselves with parliamentarians from the audience chipping in and contributing their reactions and thoughts. I think the first and most obvious challenge when we talk about, as today's topic suggests, the issue of the narrative, is that when you speak about the historic narrative relating to Tibet, you are in many ways embarking upon a battle that has already been lost. That is, that while it is unarguable that Tibet, for many periods of its history, enjoyed genuine independence, as recently as 1911 to 1950, that Tibet nonetheless is portrayed by China as an inalienable part of its country and its territory, and that the vast majority of countries around the world that recognize China have also accepted this claim. And as you know, this parliament, the Tibetan parliament in exile, finally came to the position in the early 1990s that independence was too elusive a goal, and that the demand would focus instead on autonomy. All right, on genuine autonomy. And I think that this is clearly a message that was calibrated to recognize the fact that China has been able to impose its one China narrative on the rest of the world, and not just now, even going back to the 1950s, so that today, spending a lot of time and energy on correcting the narrative and pointing out the historical facts may strike some as ultimately futile, because even if you were to, say, win a debate with the Chinese in the court of world opinion to establish that Tibet was historically an independent nation and should be regarded as such, it is a claim that even the Tibetan parliament is not making to restore that status of independence. So I would say that what is more important now would be to focus on saying that it is precisely because there were large periods of history where Tibet was not under the control of Beijing or whichever Chinese capital of that era it was, that it has evolved a very distinctive culture, religious practice, social mores, and as well as that entire, shall we say, the attributes of a separate and distinct people, which the Chinese should not be allowed to suppress through the systematic campaign of Hanification that we have seen taking place in many of the so-called autonomous regions of China. I was interested to meet a few minutes ago a delegate from the Uyghur community, because exactly the same thing is being done to them there. The attempt to essentially indoctrinate new generations in an understanding of their past that precludes any understanding that challenges the Chinese narrative. And so it becomes very important, I think, to remind both the world at large and even the Tibetan people who are still in Tibet that there is another side to the story, and that needs to be told. And this is certainly a major responsibility of the Tibetan parliament in exile, but it is also a responsibility that we all have in the media to which we might have access. I say this because one of the concerns I have been increasingly having is the descent from a sort of peak about 15, 20 years ago, thanks to all the other issues that have arisen in the world since, a descent into Tibet being largely ignored in the world media in ways that I think can be quite worrying for your narrative unless rapidly corrected. I was struck that here you are, a gathering of international parliamentarians from 26 countries who have come together with Tibetan parliamentarians in exile to discuss all these issues. And there is practically no journalist from a major American publication, let alone an international news agency or an international publication. And I think whether it was because you didn't invite them or because you did and didn't try hard enough, or you tried hard enough but they still chose not to come, whatever the cause may be, this is damaging. And it's damaging because the story is intrinsically interesting, but people only realize it is interesting if they hear it being told. And it will not be told unless we make a conscious effort to get it out into the media. Of course, some of us can use social media for the purpose, and we should and we must, but getting media organizations to pay attention is very much part of the challenge. Awareness building, the challenge of awareness cannot be underestimated. I was interested to hear that Speaker Pelosi yesterday called for action, a plan of action. We also need a plan of awareness. We need to have a serious commitment to getting awareness of the case for a genuine autonomy, an autonomy that allows the Tibetan people within China, since we have to acknowledge Chinese sovereignty in today's realities, but the Tibetan people within China to preserve what is distinctive about their culture as a people, to be able to develop their religion free of interference from mandarins appointed from elsewhere, to be able to preserve their language and all its traditional strengths, to be able to exercise the right to transmit culture from generation to generation, as well as to be able to teach distinctive ideas of culture and history to their children. At the moment, this is what is sought to be ruthlessly stamped out. And unless we are in a position to be able to change the global narrative such that China too finds it in its interest to demonstrate to the world that this is happening, that there is a certain degree of autonomy being granted. Unless that is done, then those who really want to suppress that autonomy can simply say, well, the world has lost interest. There was a time when they were getting a lot of attention. That's over now. No more Hollywood movies, no more Richard Gere, no more big headlines. Let us now decide to grind our heels into Tibet because no one's paying attention. So keeping the cause alive requires the media, and it's a plea that the next time a meeting like this is convened, that we should have a press gallery and lots of people in it. A different point that I wanted to make comes from my own experience of dealing with some of these questions within my country, India, which, as you know, has the largest Tibetan diaspora, going back to 1959 and with steady infusion since. At its peak about 100,000, but in recent years the number is coming down because of outmigration into other countries. Now, part of the challenge that we particularly have for Tibetans in India is that there has been on both sides a desire not to promote assimilation. I think some Tibetans feel that if they were to assimilate too readily into India, for example, and apply for Indian citizenship, then they will be deemed by other Tibetans to be insufficiently loyal to the cause. They will not be fighting. They will not be seen as fighting for the cause of the Tibetan people. From the Indian point of view too, once somebody becomes Indian, their rights, obligations, and their role in society changes from that which is occupied by a Tibetan refugee or even a second generation refugee working for a change in his homeland. And these issues have not been satisfactorily resolved because there is an additional complication in India. India does not permit dual citizenship. So while the much smaller Tibetan diaspora in other countries, and particularly in Western countries, have found that it is possible to claim dual citizenship in those countries, claim citizenship of the countries in which they are living, and therefore assimilate. And I was very pleased to see people like the young lady here, who's a representative elected by voters in her constituency in Canada, while at the same time being a voice for the Tibetan community. And I think this is wonderful. But hers is therefore an interesting case because, unfortunately, right now, it's not so easy to do that in India. And I was going to suggest that perhaps the Tibetan Parliament in exile might want to consider a formula that would be beneficial to Tibetans caught in the horns of such a dilemma in those countries that do not permit dual citizenship, in order to remove this problem and this dilemma from them. And my suggestion would be analogous to, but better than, I hope, what India does for its overseas diaspora, the creation of an overseas citizenship of India. The overseas citizenship of India is a card given to Indians living in foreign countries who have taken on the citizenship of their foreign countries but want to retain a connection to their ancestral homeland, want to travel back and forth, want to visit, want to even buy property, want to do anything there except retain the right to vote. But because they don't have the right to vote, their citizenship is not a completely proper citizenship. What I would suggest the Tibetan Parliament contemplate is a category in which the Tibetan diaspora retains all the rights of Tibet, including the right to vote for Tibetan parliamentarians in exile, and bodies and so on, but while doing that despite accepting the citizenship of another country. So the logic would be, yeah. Sorry about that. So if this one conks out, I'll turn to the other. So the logic would be that you could have all the benefits of full assimilation into the societies in which you are living, including the citizenship of those societies, of those countries, those states, while having a status that recognizes you as a Tibetan rather than being reduced to the kind of statelessness experienced by many Tibetans based in India, who have found that they have to travel on provisional documents because, of course, a Tibetan passport is not recognized abroad for international travel purposes. At the same time, they are reluctant to take on Indian citizenship for fear of losing their Tibetan status. And I would suggest that this issue be looked into very carefully by you parliamentarians, and I think if you can pass some sort of measure in the Tibetan Parliament in exile that creates a document that recognizes for Tibetans who have accepted the citizenship of another country a status that in no way infringes upon their rights and privileges as citizens of other countries, but at the same time enables them to participate fully in Tibetan issues, including electing their representatives and their voices in the Tibetan Parliament, including one day, when circumstances permit, laying claim to their ancestral home of Tibet as well. If that is something that you can contemplate, I believe it would be a useful advance. These, therefore, are the two major, shall we say, new ideas that I thought I would offer you this morning. I understand you have discussed many other key issues already, including, for example, the enormous implications for the global environment of Tibet's particular situation. The Tibetan Plateau is such an important place when it comes to global climate change issues, and I certainly applaud you for having tackled this in the session this morning, I think before the present one. And if there are other issues that you would like to bounce off this panel, and particularly if there's anything you want to hear my thoughts on, I'd be very happy to respond during the exchange we will have as soon as the other panelists have spoken. So thank you very much, Minister Dalma, for giving me the floor. My congratulations to all those who've taken the initiative to convene this very valuable gathering. In the introduction of me, it was mentioned that I had called for the the Bharat Ratna, which is India's highest civilian award, to the Dalai Lama. And I must say that I've had the great pleasure and honor of meeting His Holiness on 4 or 5 occasions scattered over 4 decades. And it has been a rare blessing to have shared the planet with him, let alone a stage or a forum. A remarkable individual. And I think his contributions to the Tibetan cause can never be matched, but the message, the legacy, the work he has begun must continue for many years to come. I'll leave it there, and I'm sure there are other things we can talk about, and who knows, perhaps the panelists themselves may say things that provoke me to ask you, Minister, for the floor again. With those words, thank you very much.